Well, it's March. We got a new Blumhouse horror movie called Imaginary, but just how imaginary is it? Imaginary stars DeWanda Wise, Tegan Burns, Piper Braun, and is directed by Jeff Wadlow. What's up, guys? Time for a brand new 2024 review. A movie that got no press screening as far as I know. I don't even know if there was an advanced screening for it. I think there was. I think I heard somebody say there was. But it just feels like Blumhouse was just trying to push this movie through the system and let's get it over with and let's move forward. So obviously when I go into a movie like this that has no like buzz or anything like that, I expect the worst. And sometimes that's a good thing because you go into the movie expecting the worst and you might get something else.
Every culture has entities that tether to the young. We call them imaginary friends.
Let's talk about Imaginary. First, let's give you a quick plot synopsis. Our main character is Jessica, played by DeWanda Wise. In the present day, she's married to this guy who has kids from a previous marriage. And so obviously, any stepmother is going to have trouble trying to win over children from, I guess, a different mother. So that's part of the formula here, but Jessica's interesting because when she was a child, she had an imaginary friend. And things got a little out of hand, and her father ended up having some issues of his own because he was trying to, I guess, step in, because sometimes these imaginary friends with children can go a little bit too far, and a parent has to figure out, okay, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And this movie definitely delves deeply into the whole idea of an imaginary friend. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but I'll just say this. What if you had an imaginary friend when you were a child and somehow that was carried forward into your adult life? But the family, they end up moving back into the house that Jessica lived when she was 5 years old. And she's a graphic artist now and a writer. She writes children's books. She's pretty successful. And when she goes back to her old neighborhood, she runs into this old lady who used to babysit her, who factors into the story as well. But overall, I mean, this feels like your typical Blumhouse, I guess, small scale. I mean, we just did Night Swim not too long ago. There's some similar elements to that movie in that you have a a movie that focuses on a family and some kind of evil supernatural entity comes in. It seems like we can't get away from these movies. Now, I'm going to say, going into this movie and about the first half of the movie, it is pretty formulaic. A lot of tropes. I was getting kind of bored. The writing isn't the best because there's just no build to what comes in, I'd say, the second half of the movie, which I think is much better. So I feel like maybe another pass should have been taken on the script of this movie, but we'll get into the cons, all right? But let's start off with some things I actually liked about this movie, and it quite surprised me. They established this relationship between Jessica and her stepchildren, Taylor and Alice. Taylor is the teenager. She is rebellious. She doesn't want to have anything to do with the stepmother, and that's very believable. You know, she's your typical rude teenager, you know, glued to her cell phone, all that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I liked about this movie that I didn't expect was I thought it was going to be really superficial with that relationship and that was going to kind of ride through the whole thing. But no, they actually form a bond about midway into the movie because of these supernatural elements that are going on. I didn't tell you that there's a bear. You can see it in the trailer by the name of Chauncey. Chauncey is the imaginary friend of the young child, Alice. And I think her name was Alice for a reason. If you see this movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, especially once you get to the second half. Piper Braun plays Alice, and I have to give mad props to this young actress because she's got a lot to carry on her shoulders in this movie, and I think she does a damn good job, actually. Playing a child with an imaginary friend that has to go through all these different emotions and whatnot, you know, be it fear, be it anger, be it sadness. And I really liked Tegan Burns, who played her teenage sister. Again, a character that actually had some meat to chew on by the second half of the movie. And I think the biggest praise I can give her is I didn't like her at all at the beginning of the movie, and I wasn't supposed to, you know. But by the end of the movie, you are really impressed with her. And Tegan Burns does a great job bringing you from, I guess, the bad side to the good side of that character. You know, this is a character that actually had some depth. And lastly, DeWanda Weiss, she carries this movie on her shoulders, and they definitely explore her childhood in this movie and how it plays a big part into the whole imaginary friend aspect. But I think the biggest thing that I can foot stomp about this movie that I actually dug quite a bit was just how ambitious it got in the third act. And I did not expect that at all. This movie could have went down the same tired, tropey, supernatural type movie. There is some of that in this, but it does get quite ambitious, and I was quite surprised. I did not expect that. I was even drawing comparisons to Hellraiser 2, with the whole Leviathan type thing at the end of that movie. A little bit of Five Nights at Freddy's in here, and a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street, believe it or not, which was kind of cool. There were some nice surprises. There's actually a pretty cool twist in the movie, which some of you might predict, some of you might not. But I like that this movie definitely kept me on my toes, on the second half. Now, jumping into the cons, I will say, and I alluded to it earlier in the review, I don't think the writing is the best, especially in the first act. But they are setting the table, trying to get to know the characters, and I think that's a big problem that I have with the movie is, at first I didn't really care too much about the characters because I felt like they were a bit shallow and formulaic. Luckily, they do bring them around, but take somebody like M. Night Shyamalan. I love how he handles characters, and this movie had the right amount of characters that you could have had some really interesting exchanges throughout. I guess I'm talking about comedy, because this movie could have had some lighthearted moments given the subject matter that might have worked, and they did try with that, but I don't think they really sent it home. I think this movie also has a problem with trying to tell you too much without actually just letting the events play out. It almost insults the audience's intelligence, and this movie didn't really need to do that. There's quite a bit of unnecessary exposition, I think. They're trying to explain everything to you. But I think a lot of you guys are going to be quite surprised with how ambitious this movie gets and what it tries to achieve. I don't think it fully reaches that goal. I appreciate a director that's really trying to get a message across, and that message might require some, huge sound stages, set pieces. This movie definitely tries to take you to another world, opening up one's imagination, right? It's not the scariest thing. I think it does have some creepy moments here and there, but overall, I don't think the movie is fully a horror movie. I think it definitely has more fantasy elements here and there. It's a mix of things, but overall, I was pretty entertained by it. So I'm gonna give it a high humdrum, which is a shocker because I thought this movie was probably gonna be a 2 hours lost. If you would have asked me about midway through the movie, I probably would have given it that rating, but luckily, it picks up steam midway through and it really never lets go. And I like when movies do that. So I'm sure there's gonna be all kinds of opinions on this movie. IMDb's rating isn't the best. So I'm sure a lot of you aren't gonna like this movie. It's not for everybody, but I think some of you will, okay? So really looking forward to getting down in the comments, okay? Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For Fridays. Follow my Drumdums on my socials. Support me on Patreon. Become a channel member. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Drumdum out.